Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little unsettling. You and we're going to imagine a sky that's lost its sparkle. A sky emptied of every shimmering dot you've ever wished upon. The stars, all of them, gone. Just like that. Of course, you're probably not going to survive this. None of us are. Because if the stars truly vanished, not just visually but physically, well, let's just say things would get dark in more ways than one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe to the video, but only if you really enjoy what I'm doing here. No pressure, unless you want to help me keep this little dream factory alive. Oh, and while you're at it, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I love seeing how far our sleepy constellation of listeners stretches across the globe. It's comforting, somehow, that even if the stars were to vanish above us, there's still this invisible web connecting us all down here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's start our journey together tonight. So, let's do it. Let's erase the stars. Imagine yourself standing outside. Maybe on a balcony, or maybe somewhere quieter, an empty beach, a vast desert, a mountaintop. The air is cool, crisp, silent. You look up expecting that familiar tapestry of tiny pinpricks stretched across the black. But there's nothing. No constellations. No Milky Way haze. No shooting stars, no faint glows. Just black. A vast, heavy blackness that seems to press down on you, pulling your breath from your lungs. It feels like the sky itself has fallen asleep, or worse, died. There's a certain primal fear that creeps in when the stars are missing. Even if you're not someone who looks up often, your brain knows something's wrong. Somewhere deep in your DNA is the memory of ancestors who navigated by those lights, who told stories by them, who measured time and harvested food because of them. And now? Nothing. The absence of stars would mess with you in ways you can't quite explain. Your sense of direction, your sense of rhythm, even your sense of scale. The night sky gives you perspective. It reminds you that you're small, yes, but also part of something unimaginably vast. Without it, you're adrift. Of course, the real sky can't just go dark overnight. Stars are light years away. If every single one blinked out at once, the light they've already sent would still be traveling towards us for years, centuries, even millennia. So you'd still see them for a while, until you didn't. That's the first creepy part. The stars could already be gone, and you wouldn't know it. Astronomers know this. Some of the stars you've wished on, they're already dead. Supernova ghosts. Light from the past still gently falling through the atmosphere, as if the sky itself is whispering stories from a time when those stars still burned. It's humbling. And honestly, a little terrifying. Let's make this worse, shall we? Imagine you've grown up without stars. No North Star to guide sailors. No constellations to shape myths. No Milky Way to spark curiosity. Civilization would have unfolded differently. Entire cultures wouldn't exist. Navigation, calendars, even religious stories would have taken alien forms, if they existed at all. You see, stars weren't just pretty, they were essential. Before Google Maps, before compasses, before timepieces, there were stars. Now without them, you'd notice something subtle but profound. Your nights would feel thinner, emptier, and not just visually. You might not even realize why you feel unsettled. Your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells your body when to sleep, when to wake, would start to drift without the gentle cues of starlight and moon cycles. Animal migrations would falter. Coral reefs, yes, coral, use the moon and stars to time their mass spawning events. Even fireflies in some parts of the world blink in harmony with the night sky. Without that cosmic metronome? Chaos. And here's something really weird. There's a theory that our brains are hardwired to look for patterns in the stars. It's called pareidolia, the tendency to see shapes and randomness. It's why ancient humans connected stars into bears, hunters, goddesses. Without stars, that neurological itch might express itself in strange ways. People might start seeing patterns where none exist. Maybe in the clouds. Maybe in the cracks of walls. Maybe in the dark. Historians still debate just how deeply starlight shaped early human society. Some argue that even the concept of storytelling itself, our ability to imagine, to mythologize, began when we started projecting narratives onto the night sky. Without that, would we have invented stories at all? Would we even have dreams? It's chilling to think about. Let's zoom in for a moment. Picture yourself lying in bed. The room is quiet. The soft hum of a fan in the corner. Maybe the distant sound of traffic or an owl hooting far away. You glance at the window. It's dark. You know there are no stars beyond that glass. No twinkle. No watchful lights. You might not notice the difference at first. But deep inside, something would. Something old, something ancient. The part of you that still remembers campfires and stories under open skies. The part of you that dreams in myths. Even your language would change. Phrases like reach for the stars wouldn't exist. We talk about stardust and star-crossed lovers and the stars aligning. Without them, we'd lose more than just beauty, we'd lose meaning. And yet, there's something peaceful about it too, isn't there? A clean slate. A pure black canvas stretching in every direction. A universe that's quiet. Silent. As if it's waiting. And as you breathe slower, your eyes heavy, maybe you start to feel it. The calm. The hush. The slow, soft drift into a sky without stars. Just you. Just the dark. Just the gentle rhythm of breath in your chest, rising and falling like waves under a forgotten sky. And you can't help but wonder. What would it feel like to wake up in a world where no one remembered stars had ever existed? But we're not there yet. For now, let's keep walking. Let's move deeper into the darkness and see what stories the missing stars have left behind. Your footsteps are soft against the earth as you keep walking beneath that endless, starless sky. It's strange how quickly your mind starts to fill in the blanks. You find yourself searching the darkness automatically, expecting something, anything, to sparkle back. But there's nothing. Just velvety black. And yet, in the stillness, something ancient stirs. Because long before telescopes, long before satellites and glowing phone screens, our ancestors stood under these same skies, gazing upward with awe. The stars weren't just pretty lights to them, they were living stories. Imagine it, tens of thousands of years ago, somewhere on the African savanna or along the icy edges of a glacier, your distant ancestors gathered around flickering fires. They looked up, their eyes wide, mouths open in wonder. Above them stretched rivers of light, stars as thick as spilled salt, shining in impossible numbers. To them, the sky was an empty space. It was alive. It whispered of gods, of animals, of hunters and lovers, of creatures both feared and revered. The constellations were like celestial tattoos, burned into memory across generations. Some historians argue that storytelling itself, the heartbeat of every human culture, was born from those first nights of skywatching. When early humans began to connect those glowing dots, they didn't just map the stars, they mapped meaning. They invented heroes and villains, monsters and miracles. The night sky became the first movie screen, the first library, the first canvas. Without stars, none of that would have happened. Think about that for a second. Without the night sky, there might never have been myths of Orion the Hunter, or tales of the Seven Sisters, or legends of the Milky Way as the path of departed souls. No Norse gods riding through the heavens, no celestial dragons in ancient China, no tales of sky deities weaving the cosmos. Without stars, human imagination might never have taken flight. And it wasn't just imagination. Stars helped early humans survive. They tracked the rising and setting of constellations to time the seasons, when to plant, when to harvest, when to prepare for the long sleep of winter. In the absence of calendars or clocks, the stars were the most reliable tool our ancestors had. Even ancient monuments, Stonehenge, the Great Pyramids, the mysterious Nazca lines, align with celestial bodies. Civilizations rose and fell by starlight. Now, without them, You can almost feel the void. A world without that shared cosmic map would feel unmoored, untethered. You slow your pace. The silence of this imaginary, starless world is oddly heavy. There's no gentle blinking from above, no dreamy glow of distant galaxies. Just emptiness. And you start to wonder, would we even have words like destiny or hope if we'd never looked up at the night sky and felt small? Would we have ever imagined there was something greater than ourselves? Anthropologists still debate this. Some suggest that religious belief, our urge to find patterns, to tell ourselves we're part of something vast, began with stargazing. The stars inspired awe, yes, but also humility. They reminded early humans that life was fleeting, but the universe was endless. Without stars, that perspective might never have taken root. And then there's navigation. You turn your mind to the ancient Polynesians, seafarers who crossed entire oceans by reading the stars. No GPS, no maps, just the glint of starlight on water. They memorized the night sky like you might memorize a childhood song. Every star had a name, every constellation a meaning. To them, the sky was as familiar as the land beneath their feet. Or think of the Bedouins, navigating endless deserts by the North Star. Or the Vikings, who, according to some theories, used sunstones and starlight to find distant shores. Without stars, none of those journeys could have happened. Entire cultures of exploration, trade, migration, gone. And animals? Oh, it gets even weirder. Did you know that some birds, like warblers, actually migrate by the stars? Scientists once placed them in planetariums, adjusting the fake night sky, and the birds would change direction based on the stars overhead. Sea turtles use the moon and starlight to find their way home after decades adrift. Even certain types of dung beetles, yes, dung beetles, orient themselves by the glow of the Milky Way. Without stars, millions of creatures would be lost, literally. You take a breath. The weight of this imaginary world presses gently on your chest. The air feels colder, somehow lonelier. And yet, there's something quietly beautiful about it too, isn't there? Without stars, we might be forced to look inward. To find new myths not in the heavens but in the oceans, in the forests, in the microscopic worlds beneath our feet. We might tell stories of atoms instead of constellations, of neurons instead of nebulae. Maybe we'd build new ways to dream. You close your eyes for a moment, letting that thought settle. The soft hum of the imaginary fan fills your ears. Somewhere, in the darkness, you sense the lingering memory of stars you'll never see again. But your journey isn't over. The sky may be empty tonight, but there's still so much more to discover in the silence. So you take another step forward, and we keep drifting. Your footsteps are soft as you wander further into this hushed, unfamiliar night. With each step, the sky above you stretches wider, darker, emptier. And though you tell yourself it's fine, just imagination, just a game, somewhere deep inside, a strange discomfort stirs. Because without stars, something essential has vanished, wonder. For thousands of years, long before skyscrapers and electric lights, humans stood where you stand now. They tilted their heads back and searched for meaning in the sparkling chaos overhead. They found heroes battling monsters, hunters chasing prey, lovers torn apart across the heavens. Each twinkle became a story. Every pattern became a myth. It wasn't just science, it was survival. It was art. It was the heart of humanity. But in this starless world, those stories are gone. The sky is blank. Directionless. Empty. You take another step and think about the sailors, the explorers, the wanderers of the past. Imagine being on the open sea, pitch black ocean beneath you, pitch black sky above. No North Star to guide you. No Orion's belt pointing the way home. Just the slow churn of waves in a darkness so thick it feels alive. Navigation would collapse. Entire eras of human exploration, gone. The age of discovery? Never would have happened. Polynesian wayfinding? Impossible. Even animal migrations, birds, whales, sea turtles, would falter. Every being on Earth that once looked to the stars for direction would be lost. And not just physically. Something quieter, something deeper would shift inside people too. Without that cosmic map, without those glowing markers overhead, your sense of place would fade. You might not notice it immediately, but slowly, it would gnaw at you. Psychologists know this feeling. They call it directional disorientation, the unease you get when you lose your sense of north, of movement, of belonging. Some hikers have described it as pure panic. Astronauts floating in space report a similar sensation when they can't find Earth in the endless dark. Without stars, you would be adrift, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And here's the curious thing, even in modern cities, where light pollution already hides most stars from view, our brains still expect them. There's something unsettling about an empty sky, even when it's normal. It's why people in blackout zones during power cuts often report unease they can't explain. Your ancient instincts, millions of years old, whisper that something is off. You pause in the darkness, letting that thought settle. And then you think about memory. About how deeply the night sky shaped not just exploration but who we are. The oldest human records aren't books, they're the stars themselves. The positions of constellations were carved into stone, painted on cave walls, etched into the patterns of pyramids and temples. Without stars, those memories would be gone. Even language would shift. Words like star-crossed, starlight, shooting star, guiding star, all gone. Songs, poems, lullabies, vanished. You imagine a world where a child has never made a wish on the first star they saw at night. Where lovers never pointed out constellations on late-night walks. Where no one ever lay on a rooftop, watching for falling stars. Without stars, life would be smaller. And here's something even weirder, some scientists argue that the lack of visible stars might even affect your perception of time itself. Time feels different under a full sky. The slow arc of the stars, the phases of the moon, the rising of Venus, these cosmic rhythms shape your internal clock more than you realize. Without them, you might feel unmoored. Adrift in time as well as space. Historians still debate how much ancient societies depended on stellar timekeeping. Some argue that even early farming couldn't have existed without the stars. The night sky told people when to sow, when to harvest, when to gather. Without that celestial calendar, agriculture, the backbone of civilization, might never have been born. It's humbling, isn't it? How something so far away, so untouchable, could shape something as immediate as a loaf of bread. You smile softly at the thought. The idea that starlight touches everything, from myth to memory to your next meal. But here, in this imaginary world, the stars are gone. And without them, even the way you tell stories would change. Consider this, humans evolved with darkness. Fire came late. Electricity came even later. For most of human history, nights were black except for one thing, the stars. That contrast between shadow and sparkle shaped our minds. It taught us to dream, to imagine, to wonder. Without it, would art have blossomed? Would we have painted, sculpted, sung? One strange theory suggests that even the earliest cave paintings were inspired by constellations. That the dots and animal shapes found deep in prehistoric caves mirror the shapes of stars seen by our ancestors. No stars, no art? It's possible. And without stories, would we have empathy? Would we have connection? You stop walking. The air feels different. Thicker. As if the universe itself is holding its breath. The thought crosses your mind, would we have even developed science without stars? The first astronomers, Babylonian priests, Mayan mathematicians, Islamic scholars, studied the heavens not for beauty, but to understand the patterns of the world. From those patterns came physics, math, philosophy. The very idea of laws of motion, laws of nature, might have begun with watching the orderly dance of celestial bodies. Without stars, would we even believe in order? You exhale slowly. There's something oddly soothing about this endless darkness. Yes, it's unsettling. Yes, it's strange. But there's also a kind of freedom in it. A blank page. A new canvas. No stars. No stories. No maps. Just you, and whatever new myths you choose to write on the dark. You take one more step, and the journey continues. The air feels colder as you drift deeper into this imaginary night, this sky without stars. The quiet is heavier here, the darkness thicker, as if even the ground beneath your feet has forgotten the glow that once bathed it in silver. And somewhere inside you, a question whispers. Where did they go? Because stars don't just vanish. They die. And most of the time, they die without anyone even noticing. You tilt your head back, gazing at that impossible black, and for a moment, you let yourself imagine it. The true death of a star. The process isn't loud. It isn't quick. It's not the grand fireworks show you might expect. No sudden cosmic bang, no apocalyptic flash. No, when most stars die, they do so quietly. Softly. Patiently. Over millions, sometimes billions, of years. A small star, like our own sun, doesn't explode at the end of its life. It swells, gently, into a red giant, bloated and slow, before shedding its outer layers and leaving behind a glowing ember called a white dwarf. That ember, tiny, dense, barely alive, will slowly cool over trillions of years until it becomes nothing. A black dwarf. Cold, dark, silent. A death without drama. A sigh, not a scream. And you realize, the night sky you've always known isn't a portrait of life. It's a graveyard. Most of the light you see up there, if the stars were still shining, is old. Some of it comes from stars that died long before humans invented writing. Before the first wheel. Before fire, even. It's unsettling, isn't it? To think that the sky you trust is lying to you. That many of the twinkles you loved as a child were already ghosts when you first saw them. Astronomers have a name for this, light delay. The farther away an object is, the older the light you're seeing. Which means you're not looking at the present when you gaze at the stars, you're looking at a vast collage of the past. A sky made of memories. In this starless world you're walking through, that memory is gone. But in the real world, it's still there. Fading. Changing. Massive stars, the big, showy ones, die differently. They go supernova. And for a brief moment, days, maybe weeks, they burn brighter than entire galaxies. And then, they collapse. Sometimes into a neutron star, an object so dense a teaspoon would weigh billions of tons. Or, more dramatically, into a black hole. And black holes, well, that's a different kind of disappearance entirely. You shiver slightly. Historians still debate whether ancient humans ever witnessed a supernova. There are hints, old Chinese records, odd petroglyphs, that maybe they did. A sudden new star appearing where none had been before. A flash in the dark. And for those ancient people, with no knowledge of physics or astronomy, it must have seemed like the gods themselves had torn open the sky. But in this world of yours, this quiet midnight you're imagining, there are no supernovae. No silent embers. No cosmic fireworks. The stars aren't dying one by one. They're just gone. All at once. Without warning. And that's worse, somehow. Because at least death is part of life. At least the cycle makes sense. The swelling, the fading, the final flicker, there's beauty in that story. Meaning. But a sky stripped bare? Erased? That's different. That's chaos. You stop walking. The silence presses in. You can almost feel the weight of the missing stars above you, like an absence you can touch. And here's a strange thought, even in the real world, we're surrounded by star death. It's just too slow for us to notice. The Milky Way itself is littered with stellar corpses. White dwarfs. Neutron stars. Black holes. Right now, somewhere above your head, if the stars were still there, light from a supernova explosion that happened billions of years ago is still making its way toward Earth. It's traveling across impossible distances, quietly, relentlessly, bringing the story of a death you'll never witness, from a star you never knew. In some cultures, the stars were seen as ancestors, spirits watching from the sky. When they flickered, it meant something. A message. A warning. A blessing. Without them, that message is gone. The bridge between earth and sky is broken. And for animals too, the absence would be catastrophic. Migrations timed to constellations would fail. Coral spawning would collapse. Even the humble firefly, some species blink in rhythm with moonlight, might lose its dance. And in this darkness, you can't help but wonder, are we the only species that mourns the stars? Because it feels like mourning, doesn't it? You keep walking, your breath steady, your steps slow. The air is still. The dark is endless. Somewhere in your mind, you remember that not all stars die the same way. That there are blue giants that live fast and die young, burning through their fuel in a few million years. And there are red dwarfs, so stable they might last trillions of years, long after every other star has faded. But in this imagined night, none of that matters. The giants, the dwarfs, the embers, they're all gone. And you think, maybe that's the real horror of it. Not just the darkness, but the loss of time itself. Because the stars don't just mark space, they mark history. The sky is the oldest thing you know. A clock so vast, so ancient, that your own life is a blink by comparison. Without it, you are timeless. Unanchored. And so you take a breath. And you walk on. The sky is silent. The stars are gone. But your story, this quiet wandering, continues. Your steps grow softer now, as if even the ground beneath you is unsure of itself in this endless, starless dark. Overhead, the black stretches on and on, silent, still, untouched by even the faintest glow. And yet, if you squint, if you really pay attention, you might still see them. The stars. Or at least, the ghosts of stars long gone. Because here's the curious thing, even if the stars had vanished, snuffed out in some unimaginable cosmic event, you wouldn't notice. Not right away. Light doesn't care about your schedule. It travels at its own pace, relentless, untouchable, mind-bendingly fast, but not instant. If every star in the sky were to die this very moment, their final light would keep streaming toward you for years. For centuries. For millennia. Some of the constellations you know best, Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, are made of stars so far away that their ancient light began its journey before the pyramids were built. Before the wheel. Before human memory itself. In fact, many of the stars you've already seen in your life, they're dead. Have been for ages. What you witnessed, what you wished on, was history. That's the unnerving beauty of the night sky. It's not real. Or rather, it's not now. It's a time machine. A living memory, suspended in the dark. Astronomers call this light lag, and it's both poetic and deeply disturbing when you stop to think about it. You pause for a moment, letting that thought settle. You realize that you've never truly seen the present sky. Only old stories written in photons, tiny packages of energy that raced across the abyss just to brush against your eye. In a way, you've been living in a graveyard of stars all along. Some historians believe ancient peoples sensed this somehow. That they instinctively understood the sky was a kind of record, a kind of memory. It's why so many myths and rituals are tied not just to specific stars, but to their appearances and disappearances. The Egyptians, for example, watched for Sirius, the dog star, to rise, signaling the flooding of the Nile. The Maya tracked Venus, associating it with war and prophecy. Polynesian navigators read entire seasonal changes in the shifting constellations. Every blink of starlight was a message. A warning. A story. And in this imagined world of yours, this skyless night, that message has gone silent. But here's the really eerie part, even in the real universe, stars are dying all the time. The only reason you don't notice is because of that delay. The time it takes for their final breath, the last wave of light, to cross the gulfs of space and reach your fragile little eyes. That's why, right now, As you imagine this silent blackness overhead, there could be a supernova happening somewhere. Right now. Right this second. And you won't know for tens of thousands of years. The sky is always out of sync. You keep walking. And you wonder, how would you ever know the difference? If the stars blinked out, if their light ceased, you'd still see them for years. For lifetimes. For whole civilizations. Humanity could rise and fall in the space between the death of a star and the moment its darkness finally arrived. There's something terrifyingly beautiful about that. And something achingly sad. Because it means the sky has always been lying to you. It's an old lie, yes. A kind one, even. But a lie nonetheless. And it makes you wonder, how much of what you see in your daily life is already gone? Not just in the stars, but in people, in places, in memories. How many things that feel alive are already over? Your mind drifts, because that's what minds do when they're quiet, when they're tired, when the dark feels close. You remember nights staring up at the stars as a child, making up your own constellations, whispering your own secret wishes. You remember the comfort those lights gave you, the sense that something ancient was watching, something eternal. But if that's all gone, you breathe out slowly. And then you remember something hopeful. Something strange. There's a theory, a weird, fringe idea, that even when stars die, even when their light fades, they leave ripples. Echoes. Gravitational fingerprints that mark the fabric of space forever. Invisible scars, so to speak, in the cosmic web. We can't see them. Not yet. But they're there. So even in this imagined blackness, you realize, the stars never really vanish. Not entirely. Their story lingers in the shape of the universe itself. Historians still debate whether ancient stone circles and monuments were built as astronomical markers, or as something more spiritual. As a way of remembering not just where the stars were, but what they meant. As if people sensed, somehow, that starlight was temporary. That memory, whether carved in rock or written in photons, was the only real permanence. And you feel that too, don't you? Even here, in this imagined silence, your mind clings to the idea of the stars. The way they used to shimmer. The way they used to tell stories. You take another step. The sky stays dark. But somewhere, deep inside, something ancient glows. The night stretches endlessly above you, thick with silence. And yet, your eyes still search, out of habit, out of hope, for even the faintest trace of light. Some old part of you still expects to see the familiar pinpricks of the stars. Still believes they might flicker back to life. But the sky remains blank. And as you keep walking through this imagined world of darkness, a thought rises quietly. Some of the stars we love most are already gone. Not in this imaginary scenario where every star has vanished at once, but here. Now. In the real sky above you tonight. Many of those twinkles, those tiny glimmers you once wished on, are echoes. Shadows. The last breaths of celestial giants that burned out long before your grandparents were born. And yet, there they are. Still visible. Still telling stories in the dark. You pause for a moment, imagining it, the stars we already lost. Take Betelgeuse, for example, the reddish star on Orion's shoulder. It's massive, unstable, and nearing the end of its life. Astronomers know it's going to go supernova, sometime. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe in 100,000 years. Or maybe it already has, and we're just waiting for the light of that explosion to reach us. That's the strange trick the universe plays. The deeper into space you look, the further back in time you're seeing. Some of the galaxies captured in the Hubble telescope's images, they don't exist anymore. You're looking at light that began its journey billions of years ago. Before Earth. Before the sun. Before life. It's haunting, isn't it? Even the sky lies in the name of beauty. You think about that as you move through this starless world. The idea that loss can be hidden by distance. That endings can masquerade as presence. That something can be gone, and yet still seen. there's a word for this in the human heart, though we rarely say it out loud. Grief. Because losing the stars, even if it happened slowly, even if their lights kept shining for lifetimes, would still be a kind of grief. The loss of wonder. The loss of direction. The loss of a story older than memory. And here's something stranger still. Some philosophers argue that our very sense of time, our awareness of past, present, future, comes from watching the stars. From noticing their slow, patient movements across the sky. From learning that the heavens changed, that patterns shifted, that nothing stayed the same. Without stars, without that celestial rhythm, would humans have ever discovered time itself? Historians still argue about this. Some say that calendars, seasons, even the idea of history began not with harvests or kings but with the simple act of looking up. The stars taught us that everything moves. Everything changes. That life is a cycle. And without them, would we have noticed? You take another breath, your steps slower now, softer. In this world without stars, you realize something odd, how much of your identity is tied to the night sky. Not just your personal memories, those childhood wishes and rooftop conversations, but the very shape of human culture. Poets would lose their muse. Sailors would lose their compass. Scientists would lose their map. Even religion would change. Countless faiths have looked to the stars for meaning. The ancient Egyptians believed the souls of kings became stars in the afterlife. The Navajo saw the constellations as sacred stories etched into the heavens. The Greeks and Romans filled the sky with gods and heroes. In this darkness, all of that is gone. And with it, a piece of what makes us, us. You pause again, letting the quiet settle around you. The imagined world feels heavier now. Denser. As if the absence itself has weight. The kind of weight you feel not on your skin, but in your chest. But there's a flicker of comfort too. Because even in this imagined silence, your mind remembers. Your heart remembers. Somewhere deep inside you, the stories of the stars still burn. Faint, yes. Distant. But not gone. And as you close your eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, you realize some stars have already died. And yet you've still seen their light. You've still made a wish. You've still felt awe. Their deaths didn't take that from you. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real magic of the stars. They teach you that beauty can linger. That memory can outlast endings. That light can outlive its source. You open your eyes. The sky is still dark. The stars are still gone. But your journey continues. And somewhere, you feel it, the ghosts of lost stars guiding your way. You walk slower now. The darkness above you is complete, unchanging, unwavering. But somehow, the longer you walk beneath this empty sky, the more you feel it, the weight of what's missing. The absence hums in your bones. And without quite realizing it, you begin to feel different. Because without the stars, something fundamental inside you has started to shift. It's subtle at first. Just a faint unease. A quiet pressure at the edges of your thoughts. But as you drift further into this imagined night, you start to sense how much the stars, the real stars, once gave you without your even knowing it. Not just navigation. Not just timekeeping. But something deeper. Something emotional. The night sky has always carried weight in the human heart. You think of ancient people, those who lived before cities, before electricity, before screens. When night fell, it fell. Darkness was complete. And above them stretched a sky so thick with stars it must have seemed endless. Alive. Breathing. They didn't just look at the stars. They felt them. They felt connected to something larger, something vast and eternal. Without that connection, what happens? Psychologists today have a term for it, existential grounding. It's the idea that looking at something vast, something infinite, can actually calm the mind. That standing beneath a starry sky reduces anxiety, lowers blood pressure, even quiets racing thoughts. It makes you feel small, yes. But in a good way. Without stars, that grounding is gone. And the longer you imagine walking through this starless world, the more you sense it, the disquiet, the heaviness, the missing perspective. Some studies suggest that people who regularly spend time in nature, especially under open skies, report higher levels of happiness, creativity, and emotional resilience. It's called the awe effect. It changes how you think, how you feel, how you see yourself in the world. Without stars, awe would fade. And with it, something essential to the human experience. You pause again, standing in the imagined darkness, and for a moment you notice how your breath sounds louder. The silence around you presses in. There's no upward escape, no glittering ceiling to lift your thoughts. It's just black. And you can't help but think, would people grow more anxious in this world? More restless? Would art suffer? Would storytelling diminish? Would something in the human heart quietly break? Historians still debate just how much early cultures depended on the stars not just for survival, but for meaning. The earliest known temple, Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, may have been built with celestial alignments in mind, thousands of years before writing or the wheel. Without that night sky to inspire such monuments, would humans have bothered to build anything? To imagine anything? To dream? You shake the thought away, but it lingers. And then you wonder, would people even sleep the same way? Your brain's internal clock, your circadian rhythm, isn't just tied to the sun. It's tied to the stars, to the gradual dimming and glowing of night. Even the moon's gentle pull has effects on the human body, sleep patterns, mood, even decision-making. In a world without stars, would sleep itself begin to fracture? Would insomnia rise? Would people drift through life untethered, restless, unable to settle? You take another breath, steadying yourself. And you realize, the stars haven't just shaped culture. They've shaped your biology. Your bones. Your blood. Your rhythms. Without them, you would still exist. But you would not be the same. You glance upward, out of habit, and see nothing but dark. No comfort. No map. No shimmer. And slowly, you begin to understand something. The night sky doesn't just give you stars. It gives you scale. Perspective. The quiet reassurance that you are part of something ancient. Something ongoing. In this imagined world, stripped of that, you feel smaller. But not in the way that heals. Smaller in a way that shrinks. And you can't help but think of astronauts. Some have spoken of the overview effect, the transformation that occurs when you see Earth from space. The profound shift in understanding that we are all, in the end, tiny passengers on a fragile, beautiful sphere suspended in black. Without the stars, without that visual reminder of vastness, would humans lose that sense of shared fragility? Of unity? It's possible. And the more you drift through this imagined night, the more you feel the weight of that loss. The way your mind reaches for something it can't find. The way your heart strains for a wonder that isn't there. But you keep walking. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We move forward, even when the light is gone. Even when the map is missing. Even when the sky is empty. You take another slow breath. And somewhere, deep inside the quiet, you feel it, the flicker of something ancient. Faint. Fragile. But not entirely gone. The memory of wonder. The shadow of awe. The echo of stars. And you walk on. The ground beneath your feet feels unfamiliar now. You can't help but glance upward again, habit, reflex, but the sky gives you nothing in return. No compass. No gentle winks of distant suns to steer your thoughts. And that's when the next layer of this silent catastrophe settles in. Without stars, navigation, both human and animal, begins to unravel. You imagine ancient mariners, adrift in endless seas, their ships slicing through black water beneath black skies. For millennia, explorers used nothing but the stars to find their way. The Polynesians, in particular, mastered this craft. They navigated across thousands of miles of open ocean, reading the constellations as easily as you might read a map. Each star was a signpost, each pattern a whispered direction. Without them, the ocean would become a cage. Boundless, but utterly without orientation. The idea of exploration itself might never have been born. You picture desert wanderers, Bedouins in the sands, the Tuareg under endless Saharan skies. No North Star. No celestial compass. Just an endless swirl of sameness. Every direction the same. Every choice, blind. And then you think of animals. Because they, too, are guided by the sky. Did you know that migrating birds use the stars? Tiny warblers, no bigger than your hand, cross entire continents guided not by landmarks, but by constellations overhead. Sea turtles, after decades lost at sea, find their way home by moonlight and starlight. Even insects, dung beetles, of all things, use the Milky Way to orient themselves as they roll their precious cargo across the dark. In this imagined world, without stars, those migrations collapse. Birds spiral endlessly, their internal maps blank. Turtles beach in the wrong places or drift forever. Even fireflies, some species blink in rhythm with the night sky, lose their dance. The world doesn't just lose direction. It loses rhythm. Purpose. Flow. You take another breath, the air cool in your lungs. The realization is unsettling. Without the stars, everything drifts. Even you. Historians still debate how much early human expansion depended on the ability to navigate by the sky. The spread of cultures, languages, technologies, could any of it have happened without starlight? Perhaps not. You think about the Vikings, bold seafarers who likely used a combination of sunstones, wave patterns, and starlight to find distant shores. Or the great trading empires of the Indian Ocean. Or the Silk Road caravans guided by Polaris, always steady in the northern sky. Without stars, the great crossings never happen. Without crossings, ideas never meet. Without meetings, civilizations stagnate. You slow your steps, sensing the weight of this quiet truth. The stars didn't just guide ships, they guided history. And then another thought comes, modernity. Would GPS exist in a world that never learned to navigate? Would we even dream of space exploration without the ancient memory of constellations overhead? Would we ever have wanted to touch the stars if we had never seen them? You can't help but feel the sadness of it. A human life, born to look down instead of up. And here's the truly eerie part, in some of the world's largest cities today, this is already happening. Light pollution has erased the stars for millions. Children grow up beneath skies that glow orange and empty. Some studies show that fewer people can identify constellations than ever before. The sky is being forgotten in real time. And with it, the old stories, the maps, the myths, the music. You pause, breathing slowly. The stillness wraps around you like a thick blanket. There's no Orion to point your way. No Southern Cross. No Little Dipper. The darkness is total. And in the quiet, you wonder, without stars, would humans have ever learned to leave home? To explore? To dream of other worlds? Some argue that the entire history of space exploration, from Galileo to Apollo to Voyager, began the first time someone tilted their head back and wondered what those distant lights were. Without stars, curiosity might have died in the cradle. And you feel that loss in your bones. You take another step, your breath steady. And you think, maybe, in the absence of stars, humanity would have turned elsewhere for wonder. The depths of the ocean, perhaps. The microcosm of life in a single drop of water. Maybe stories would still have bloomed, shaped by earth instead of sky. But it would have been different. Smaller. Less infinite. And as you move forward through this imagined, starless world, you carry that thought with you. That in the end, navigation isn't just about finding your way through space. It's about finding your way through life. Without the stars, we would still be here. But we would not be the same. You close your eyes for a moment. And then you walk on. Your feet brush gently over the ground as you drift deeper into the darkness. And though you've long since accepted the absence of stars, a new realization settles over you, one you hadn't quite noticed until now. The world itself feels quieter. Not just in sound, but in life. Because without the stars, without the subtle rhythms of their rise and fall, the Earth's nocturnal creatures, the hidden half of life, would begin to change. You pause for a moment, listening. No rustle of nighttime wings. No distant owl calls. No soft chorus of crickets under the imagined moonlight. A sky without stars is not just an emptier canvas, it's the quieting of ecosystems woven around the patterns of light and dark. Many animals, after all, don't just like the stars, they need them. Their internal clocks, their sense of time, place, season, are all tied, however subtly, to the sky. You picture the fragile web of life that unfurls each night when darkness falls, bats flitting from tree to tree, guided by moonlight. Moths, whose navigation is shaped by celestial cues. Sea creatures that rise and fall in the water column, drawn by lunar phases and starlight. The gentle migration of plankton, the very base of the food chain, timed to the moon's pull. Without the stars, this dance begins to falter. Scientists know this, they've seen it already. In places where artificial lights drown out the natural night sky, animals lose their way. Birds collide with buildings. Baby sea turtles, instead of crawling toward the starlit sea, turn inland, drawn fatally toward streetlights. Even trees, sensitive to light cues, sometimes bloom out of season in brightly lit cities. In this imagined world of yours, this blank, black sky, those errors become permanent. You walk on, the weight of this quiet catastrophe growing heavier with every step. And you think about something stranger still, what would happen to humans? We, too, are creatures of rhythm. Our bodies, though we like to imagine ourselves separate from nature, are deeply tied to light and dark. Our circadian rhythms, the biological patterns that govern when we sleep, when we wake, when we heal, are written in the language of the sky. Without stars, without that gentle framework of cosmic timing, those rhythms might begin to slip. Sleep disorders, anxiety, depression, even heart disease and immune issues, all of these have been linked to disrupted circadian cycles. Some researchers have even proposed that modern society's epidemic of sleeplessness is, at least in part, a consequence of losing the true night sky. Without stars, you wonder, would we slowly forget how to sleep? How to dream? You breathe deeply, the imagined air cool against your skin. Historians still debate how early humans first understood the concept of time. Some argue that it wasn't the sun, but the stars, their slow, patient motion across the night, that first gave us the idea of days, seasons, years. The first calendars weren't carved in stone, they were written in the heavens. Without those markers, would we have understood change? Would we have grasped the idea that life moves forward? And you think of the animals again, of the silent forests, the empty seas. Without stars, migrations falter. Songs fall silent. Ecosystems unwind. Even today, conservationists speak of a growing problem, ecological light pollution. Entire habitats disrupted because of a sky that no longer darkens. Without darkness, the natural world can't rest. Can't reset. In your imagined, starless world, that disruption would be total. No fireflies blinking in rhythm. No birds setting out on ancient paths. No coral reefs spawning in tandem with the phases of the sky. The night would become not a time of hidden life, but a time of stillness. And that stillness, you realize, is not peaceful. It's hollow. You slow your breath, your heartbeat soft. You feel the pull of this quiet, this absence, and you wonder how many stories, how many songs, how many ancient dances of life would have never existed if the stars had never shone. You take another step, your path unlit, your thoughts heavy. And still, something deep inside you resists the emptiness. Some flicker of memory. Some ancient pull. Because even in this imagined darkness, the echoes of life remain. You feel it, just barely, the way the earth still hums, still breathes, still carries the memory of the sky it once knew. And you walk on. The ground beneath your feet softens into something ancient. You barely notice the texture, the dust, the whispers of leaves, because your mind has started to wander backward. Not just through space, but through time. In this imagined world without stars, another question rises quietly inside you. What did ancient cultures see when they first looked up? And more hauntingly, what would they have become if the sky had never given them stories? You close your eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, and let yourself drift further. Across continents, across centuries, the night sky was the first teacher. Long before the first book, the first scroll, the first recorded myth, there was the sky. Stretching endlessly over deserts, forests, mountains, seas. It offered not just beauty, but meaning. It was the original storyteller. The earliest humans didn't just see dots of light. They saw patterns. They saw beings. They saw stories. The constellations weren't decorations, they were survival. They told you when the rains would come, when the herds would move, when to plant, when to harvest. They weren't just guides across the sea, but across time. In this darkened, empty sky you imagine, all of that would vanish before it ever began. No myths of Orion the hunter. No tales of the Pleiades, 7 sisters fleeing the embrace of a relentless pursuer. No legends of the Milky Way as the spine of the night, the bridge between worlds. Without stars, the oral traditions, the very heartbeat of early culture, might never have come alive. And you begin to see how much would be lost. Because stories are not just entertainment. They are memory. They are identity. They are the threads that bind one generation to the next. You think of the Navajo, who saw constellations not as distant bodies, but as sacred figures, beings woven into their ceremonies, their daily lives, their understanding of who they were. You think of the ancient Greeks, whose gods lived in the sky as much as on Mount Olympus. You think of Aboriginal Australians, whose Dreamtime stories mapped both land and sky in intricate harmony. Historians still debate just how deep this connection ran. Some suggest that astronomy was humanity's first science precisely because it was wrapped in myth. That without myth, without awe, we might never have been curious enough to ask questions at all. In your imagined, starless night, curiosity itself feels quieter. Dulled. Thinned. Without the celestial canvas overhead, would early humans have bothered to wonder? And that loss ripples forward. You can almost feel it, a world where no epics were told by firelight. Where no constellations danced across the minds of children. Where no maps of the heavens were etched into bone or stone. Without stars, we wouldn't just lose direction in space. We would lose direction in spirit. You take another step, your breath soft, the silence of this imagined sky pressing down on you. And you realize something else. Without those ancient stories, those myths told under glimmering skies, the very structure of human thought might have changed. Because stories are how we learn to dream. To imagine. To empathize. Without them, would we still have painted the walls of caves? Would we have built temples? Would we have asked the deep, restless questions that led to philosophy, science, art? Some anthropologists argue that the act of pattern recognition, the very skill that lets you see a bear in the stars, or a hunter in the sky, is the same mental process that led humans to invent language, to write poetry, to solve problems. Without stars, that first act of connecting the dots might never have happened. In the sky you walk beneath now, the imagined blankness above you feels heavier for it. You pause for a moment, your heart slowing, your breath deepening. Because there's a quiet grief to it. A sense that without the night sky, something essential in the human soul would have remained asleep. And yet, something stubborn stirs inside you. A flicker. A memory. Even without stars, you sense that humans, creatures of story, creatures of longing, might have still looked somewhere for meaning. Maybe the sea. Maybe the wind. Maybe the shifting shapes of clouds. Because even in darkness, the mind reaches. The heart dreams. The soul wonders. And so you take another step, softer now, quieter. The sky above you is still dark. But somewhere in the depths of your imagination, stories still wait. And you keep walking. The air feels thinner now. Not in a physical sense, this is still your imagination after all, but in a deeper, more unsettling way. The further you drift through this imagined starless world, the more you start to notice the cracks forming in the stories you thought you knew. The rules you thought were fixed. And tonight, we're going to break the biggest rule of all. What if the stars didn't fade quietly? What if they vanished, suddenly? It's a question that slips into your mind softly, like a thread of smoke. Could the stars really disappear all at once? At first, your rational mind says no. Stars don't just wink out like dying light bulbs. Physics doesn't allow for that. The universe is too vast, too stable, too slow. And yet, the more you walk through this darkness, the more your thoughts wander toward the unthinkable. Toward those rare, eerie corners of theoretical physics where the impossible becomes less impossible. You pause, breathing deeply, and you let yourself wonder. Could the stars simply stop? Some fringe theories suggest that our universe isn't as stable as it seems. That hidden beneath the gentle hum of reality is a deep, cosmic tension, one that could, in theory, snap. The so-called vacuum decay theory whispers of a universe that looks perfectly calm on the surface, but is always, quietly, teetering on the edge of annihilation. If that edge were crossed, if some quantum event far beyond human control tipped the balance, the very laws of physics could collapse. The stars, along with everything else, could vanish not in fire, but in silence. A blink. A breath. Gone. It sounds like science fiction. But it's not. Physicists, even the sober, careful ones, acknowledge the possibility, however remote. They call it a false vacuum, a temporary, unstable state of reality that could end without warning. Not with an explosion, but with the smooth, cold spread of nothingness. You shiver slightly, even though this is all imaginary. And yet, is it? Because every time you look up at the real night sky, you are, in a way, looking at something precarious. Stars burn because the universe allows them to. The dance of particles, the delicate balance of forces, it all works because reality hasn't slipped. Yet. And suddenly, the silence of this imagined, starless world feels different. It doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels fragile. You take a slow step, your heart soft in your chest, and you think of history. Historians still debate how ancient humans explain the sky's occasional disappearances. Solar eclipses. Comet storms. The sudden arrival of new stars, supernovae blazing for a moment before vanishing. For those early watchers, such events were terrifying. They were messages from the gods, omens of doom or change. And yet, even then, even in fear, people still believed the stars would return. In your imagined night, that faith is gone. The sky stays blank. The stories stay silent. And it begins to dawn on you, how much of human resilience, how much of our optimism, our willingness to hope, has always been tied to the predictability of the sky. To the fact that no matter how bad the day, the stars would rise again. That the darkness would sparkle. Without that promise, something in the human heart begins to fray. You breathe deeply, grounding yourself. And you wonder, would we have built civilizations without that quiet reassurance? Would we have dared to create, to love, to leave our footprints on this world, if the heavens above us were nothing but black? Some argue that we wouldn't. That hope itself, the most human of all instincts, comes not from certainty, but from the gentle rhythm of things that endure. The sun, the moon, the stars. In their absence, even hope might flicker. You take another step. The sky above you is still dark. But somewhere in your thoughts, you feel a quiet resistance, a tiny ember that refuses to be extinguished. Because even if the stars vanish, the memory remains. And you, this quiet traveler through the dark, carry that memory forward. And you walk on. The air feels heavier now. With every step through this imagined night, you sense the deep quiet thickening, not just above you, but within you. The absence of stars is no longer just a visual emptiness. It's something structural. something foundational. And then it hits you. The disappearance of the stars wouldn't just unsettle stories or moods. It would break the machinery of the cosmos itself. Because stars aren't just decorations. They're the engines of existence. You pause, breathing softly, and let your mind drift deeper. Right now, this very second, countless stars are holding the universe together. Their gravity binds galaxies. Their light fuels planets. Their cores forge every element heavier than hydrogen and helium. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, both were born in the hearts of ancient stars. Without them, the universe itself begins to unravel. It's called the cosmic domino effect, a phrase scientists use when talking about the interconnectedness of stellar life and galactic structure. If, somehow, every star vanished, truly vanished, the consequences would ripple outward in terrifying ways. Gravity, for one, would lose its anchors. Planets would spin adrift. Solar systems would unspool. The delicate orbits that shape everything from moons to galaxies would dissolve. But there's something subtler, too, something even more unsettling. Stars, you see, are timekeepers. Not just for humans, but for the universe itself. Without them, the arrow of time, the gradual forward march of entropy, decay, change, would lose one of its primary guides. Cosmologists still debate whether time itself is truly constant, or whether it's something that emerges from motion, from change, from the steady ticking of celestial clocks. Without those clocks, without stellar birth and death, without galactic drift, would time still feel the same? Would it still exist as we understand it? You shiver slightly, not from cold, but from the sheer scale of the question. And then you think of something smaller, something closer to home. The Earth without the sun. In this imagined starless world, the disappearance of the sun means more than just darkness. It means the end of life's basic fuel. Photosynthesis stops. Weather systems collapse. The oceans begin to freeze from the top down. The planet, over weeks and months, descends into an icy coma. Even geothermal warmth, heat from Earth's core, would only sustain life for so long. Eventually, the planet would fall silent. A frozen marble spinning endlessly through black. You pause, your breath soft, the weight of that image pressing gently against your chest. And here's the most unnerving thought of all. The stars wouldn't even know they'd gone. Because consciousness, awareness, exists only here, on this tiny rock, in this brief flicker of time. The stars, magnificent as they are, burn without knowing they burn. They die without knowing they die. And so the tragedy of their disappearance is not their tragedy. It's ours. Historians still debate how early humans first attached meaning to the stars. Some suggest it was purely practical, navigation, agriculture, survival. Others argue it was spiritual, a way to connect with something larger than the self. But perhaps it was both. Perhaps the earliest humans looked up and saw not just light, but direction. A cosmic rhythm that mirrored the pulse of life on Earth. Birth, growth, death, renewal. Without that rhythm, without stars, the pattern unravels. And you wonder, would humans in this darkened world have ever discovered patterns at all? Would mathematics exist? Would physics? Would art? Without the stars, the very idea of cause and effect might have remained hidden. You take another slow breath, grounding yourself in the silence. And then you think, what about the animals? The forests? The oceans? Without the sun, photosynthesis halts. Plant life dies. Oxygen thins. The food chain collapses. But before that, before the final freeze, there would be quiet. A strange, brief interlude of shadowed stillness as the world adjusted to the absence. And you can't help but wonder, would some creatures even notice? Deep in the oceans, where sunlight barely touches, life would continue, for a time, unaware that the stars above had vanished. Microbial colonies near thermal vents might persist for centuries, insulated from cosmic disaster. But eventually, silence would find them too. The cosmic domino doesn't care who's watching. It falls, regardless. And you, this quiet traveler through imagined dark, feel the weight of that truth. You take another step. And in the hush of the starless night, you carry the thought gently. That the stars, even unseen, shape everything. And without them, everything drifts. You close your eyes. And you walk on. Your footsteps slow. The quiet deepens. And somewhere in that silence, a new thought curls around your mind like mist. Without stars, without the subtle rhythm of celestial light, how would the living world keep time? Because time, after all, is not just numbers on a clock. It's in your bones, in your cells, in your breath. And so much of it, so much of what tells your body when to rise, when to rest, when to heal, is guided by the distant, silent glow of the stars. You pause for a moment, feeling the imagined air around you. And you realize, in this world without stars, time itself begins to fray. Scientists call it the circadian rhythm, a biological clock built into almost every living thing on Earth. From the smallest bacteria to the tallest tree, life pulses in time with light and dark, with the rotation of the planet, with the glow of the sky. And without that rhythm, something inside begins to drift. You think of plants. Without starlight and moonlight, without the subtle changes in night's glow, flowering patterns change. Pollination falters. Trees, confused by the missing signals, bloom at the wrong times or not at all. And animals? Their clocks slip too. Migrations stagger. Sleep cycles shatter. Even now, in the real world, light pollution is already causing this. Some birds no longer migrate at the right time. Some frogs breed too early. Even fireflies lose their synchrony under artificial lights. In your imagined world, this deeper darkness, those errors would grow. And then you think of yourself. Because you, too, are built for rhythm. The 24-hour clock ticking behind your eyes is not just habit. It's biological. Without cues, without the soft guidance of celestial light, your mind and body would begin to unspool. This is something scientists have tested. In the 1960s, a researcher named Michel Sifry isolated himself deep inside a cave for 2 months, completely cut off from sunlight, moonlight, and starlight. Within days, his sleep patterns began to fracture. His sense of time drifted. He lost track not just of hours but of days. At one point, he stayed awake for 36 hours straight, unable to sense when his body should stop. In this imagined world of starless skies, that disconnection becomes permanent. Your breath slows. You feel the idea curling tighter. Without stars, without the delicate ebb and flow of night, the very concept of time might dissolve. And not just personal time. Civilizations, too, would suffer. Historians still debate when humanity's obsession with clocks truly began. Some trace it to ancient Egypt, where obelisks cast shadows to measure the day. Others look to Babylonian astronomers tracking the slow drift of stars over centuries. But without stars? Without those slow, patient markers overhead? Would time even matter? Would people bother to measure it? Would they bother to celebrate it? No New Year's Eve. No calendars. No concept of history. You take a breath, your steps soft against the imagined earth. And the thought gets stranger still. Without time, would we even know who we are? Because memory, identity, is tied to time's arrow. To the sense that there is a before and an after. That you began, and are still becoming. Without that, without those skyborne signals, life might feel endless in the worst way. A constant drift. A looping dark. And in the absence of time, purpose begins to thin. You think of the animal kingdom again, of creatures who, without their internal clocks, would lose not just sleep, but survival itself. The snowshoe hare whose coat turns white for winter and brown for summer, driven by seasonal light. The Arctic fox, the migratory whale, the desert blooming after rare rains, all synced, all timed. Without celestial cues, the web unravels. And you wonder, would evolution itself have taken place? Because adaptation depends on cycles. On change. on time. Without the stars to mark those shifts, would life ever have moved beyond the simplest forms? You exhale softly, your breath barely audible in the imagined quiet. And then you think of dreams. Of how even the human brain, during sleep, follows patterns, cycles, phases. And you can't help but wonder. Without the soft rhythm of night, would we still dream the same? You take another step, your body soft, your heart steady. And as you drift forward, the thought lingers gently behind your eyes. Without stars, without time, everything stills. Everything drifts. Everything fades. But you keep moving. Because in this quiet, imagined dark, you are still here. And so you walk on. Your breath softens as you continue forward, each step lighter than the last. By now, the emptiness above you feels almost normal. The absence of stars, the heaviness of the sky, it's become the quiet rhythm of this imagined world. But somewhere deep inside, another realization stirs. Without the stars, without those glittering guides overhead, how would anyone find their way beyond this small blue world? Space itself, exploration, ambition, reaching beyond, would be directionless. You pause, gazing upward at the endless black. And you let your mind drift into deeper dark. Because once, long ago, those tiny pinpricks of light weren't just curiosities. They were invitations. For the first humans who looked up, the stars whispered of something more. Something vast. Something waiting. Every early astronomer, every mythmaker, every sailor who dreamed of distant lands, each of them, in some way, was answering that quiet cosmic call. And in your starless world, that call never comes. The idea of leaving Earth, of building ships, telescopes, stations, requires the stars to exist first in the mind. Without them, would we ever have imagined other worlds? Other suns? Other possibilities? You think of the first telescopes, the hands that built them, the eyes that lifted them skyward. Galileo, peering at the moons of Jupiter. Herschel, discovering Uranus. The dreamers who followed, Kepler, Hubble, Hawking, all of them children of starlight. Without that starlight, their questions would never have formed. And with no questions, no journeys. You close your eyes for a moment, and you see it, a human race content to stay small. Bound to the ground. Never reaching. Some historians suggest that the very idea of progress, of expansion, comes from the sky. The stars don't just show direction in a literal sense, they inspire the impulse to move forward. To seek. To grow. Without them, the drive to explore might have simply withered. And you wonder, would the first astronauts have ever climbed into rockets without the quiet allure of distant suns? Would telescopes have scanned the heavens without a mystery to unravel? The very shape of human destiny, our desire to push boundaries, may have been lit, gently, by starlight. You take a slow breath. And you realize, it's not just science that the stars gave us. It's hope. Because to look up at a star is to see something timeless. Something that says, there is more than this moment. More than this place. More than this pain. In this imagined world, without stars, hope itself becomes smaller. The explorers, the thinkers, the poets, they might never have risen. And yet, there's something stubborn in the human heart. Even here, in this silent dark, you feel it flicker. The idea that even without visible stars, some people, somewhere, might still imagine them. Might still dream them. Might still reach. And here's the stranger thought. Even in space itself, navigation depends on stars. Real-world spacecraft, NASA's deep space probes, for example, use stellar navigation. They lock onto distant stars to orient themselves. Without that cosmic map, even the bravest ships would drift helplessly. You can almost see it, vessels spinning through black, unable to tell up from down, lost in the vastness. And you think of animals again, humpback whales, perhaps. Birds, turtles, bats. All creatures who, for millions of years, used the night sky as their compass. Without it, migration ceases. Without migration, life stalls. The sky, you realize, is not just above us. It is inside us. Every journey, on land, on sea, in space, begins by looking up. And so in this imagined world of blankness, of quiet, of absence, something precious is lost, the desire to move. But still, you walk. Because somewhere inside you, somewhere beyond this story, this thought, something stirs. A memory. A longing. A pulse. You take another step. And in the hush of the imagined dark, you carry that spark forward. You keep walking. The stillness wraps tighter now. With each step, the weight of this imagined sky, the sky without stars, presses a little deeper into your thoughts. You've already seen how direction falters, how rhythms drift, how the mind begins to wander untethered. But tonight, another quiet truth unfolds. Without stars, art would never have become what it is. You pause, letting that realization bloom gently. Because the stars, those tiny pinpricks of ancient fire, did more than guide explorers. They ignited the human imagination. You think of the painters, the storytellers, the poets who found their first muse in the night sky. Imagine for a moment a world without Van Gogh's Starry Night. Without the soft swirl of those glowing stars captured in trembling strokes. Without that restless beauty. It wouldn't exist. And it's not just paintings. So many of humanity's greatest works are woven through with the stars. Shakespeare spoke of the stars above us, govern our conditions. The Greeks told stories of gods and monsters woven into constellations. The Mayans etched the cycles of Venus into their temples. Islamic mathematicians measured the heavens to guide prayer. Even music, some of the oldest lullabies, were written to the rhythm of rising moons and shining stars. Without that gentle overhead glow, so many of these expressions of wonder would have never begun. You keep walking. And you think, without the stars, how would beauty itself have been defined? The color blue, once the rarest pigment, the most sacred shade, was often linked to the night sky. The curve of domed ceilings, painted in deep midnight hues. The shape of stained glass windows. The design of ancient jewelry, studded with stones meant to mimic stars. Without that nightly canopy of cosmic light, the idea of mystery itself might have dimmed. Historians still debate whether early art, cave paintings, bone carvings, was inspired by terrestrial life or something grander. Some argue that the earliest dots and circles found in prehistoric art could represent constellations. That humanity's need to mark the sky, to capture its motion, predates even agriculture. And here in this imagined world, without stars, that first artistic spark might have stayed cold. No painted myths. No celestial tapestries. No woven stories of sky gods and moon queens. And the consequences ripple forward. Without art inspired by the stars, would we have developed the same sense of the sublime? That fragile emotion where beauty and terror meet. Where awe is tinged with the dizzying understanding of scale, of insignificance. You breathe slowly. Because to stand under the real night sky, to truly see it, is to feel that delicate shiver. The same shiver that drives art, poetry, faith. Without that shiver, something in the human soul would remain untouched. You think of literature, too. No wish upon a star. No celestial metaphors. No stories of falling stars, of signs in the heavens, of lovers separated by sky. Without the stars, would we even have the idea of destiny? Because stars were more than decoration. They were symbols. Of fate. Of longing. Of unreachable beauty. And you feel the absence more deeply now. A world without stories painted in the sky is a world that learns not to reach beyond itself. That settles for the scene. That forgets to dream. You take another step, the hush deepening. And in the stillness, another quiet realization drifts through. Without the night sky, art would still exist. But it would be smaller. It would be earthbound. And in that smallness, something ancient would be lost. But still, you walk. Because some part of you, some stubborn spark, refuses to let go of the idea that beauty survives. That even in a world without stars, new myths would rise. You take another breath. And you walk on. Your footsteps are featherlight now, each movement slower, softer, as though the silence itself is growing heavier. The imagined darkness above you stretches wider, deeper, an endless canvas without color, without spark, without story. And with every breath, another quiet question rises. Without stars, what would happen to faith? You pause, your heart slow in your chest, and you feel the depth of it. Because for thousands of years, long before science, before maps, before microscopes, the stars were the first cathedral. The first scripture. The first place where people searched for meaning beyond themselves. Without that celestial ceiling, would belief itself have faded? You think of ancient temples, of pyramids aligned perfectly to the stars. Of the great ziggurat of Uar, reaching skyward like a stairway to the heavens. Of Stonehenge, its monoliths framing solstices and star paths older than memory. In this imagined world without stars, none of those would exist. No monuments pointing upward. No rituals timed to celestial cycles. No myths of gods riding chariots across the night sky. The sky, you realize, has always been more than background. It was presence. It was witness. And without it, early humans might have looked not upward, but only inward. Faith might never have stretched beyond the visible. Stories might have clung to the earth instead of soaring. You breathe softly, your pace unhurried. Historians still debate, did humans invent gods to explain the stars? Or did the stars inspire the idea of gods in the first place? Either way, the connection is woven deep. Think of the Greeks, their heavens teeming with immortal beings. Think of the Norse, whose stories of Yggdrasil, the cosmic tree, stretched through sky and beyond. Think of the Dogon of West Africa, whose myths of Sirius B predated modern astronomy by centuries. The stars weren't just decoration. They were divine. In this imagined world, with no stars to guide the spirit, belief itself might have stayed smaller. Earthbound. Less eternal. You take another step and let yourself imagine how religions would shift. No Star of Bethlehem lighting a path. No crescent moon adorning the flags of nations. No constellations to mark holy days or seasonal rites. Without celestial markers, the rhythm of belief would falter. You think of how early priests were astronomers. How the line between faith and science blurred beneath the stars. In ancient Egypt, priests not only performed rituals but tracked the stars to predict floods. The Maya timed ceremonies to Venus. The Druids marked the turning of seasons through skyborne clues. Without stars, none of this would have emerged. And the human relationship with mystery, with the sacred, would have followed a different path. Perhaps the belief in something greater wouldn't disappear entirely. Perhaps it would have shifted, to rivers, to mountains, to the wind. But the sense of infinity, of something truly boundless, that came from the sky, that would be gone. And with it, a certain kind of hope. Because to look up and see stars is to glimpse permanence. To feel, in some quiet corner of the heart, that something endures beyond life, beyond suffering, beyond death. In this world, that comfort is missing. You take a slow breath, the air tasting of quiet. And then you think of how faith also builds identity. How tribes, nations, entire civilizations shape themselves around shared stories written in the stars. Without those stories, without shared skybound symbols, would humanity have ever united? Would culture have evolved into the rich, tangled web it is? Or would we have remained isolated, each group living in its own small, earthbound frame? You don't know the answer. No one does. But you feel the weight of the question in your bones. And then you realize something gentle. Even in this imagined world, people would likely still seek. Still yearn. Still wonder. Because maybe faith is not dependent on stars. Maybe it is something deeper. Something woven into the very act of asking questions in the dark. And so you walk on. The sky is still empty. But your thoughts are full. And somewhere in the quiet, The spark of belief, whatever shape it takes, remains. Your steps have grown slower now, not out of weariness but from the weight of what you're carrying. Not in your hands, not on your back, but in your mind. Because this imagined world, this silent, starless sky, is not just changing the way you move through space. It's reshaping the way you move through memory. And somewhere, another quiet thought drifts into place. Without the stars, the ancient language of the sky would be forgotten. Erased before it was ever written. You pause, your breath soft and steady, and you let your mind wander through time. For tens of thousands of years, humans have told stories by the stars. Constellations are not just random dots. They are a living map, a language, passed from voice to voice, eye to eye, campfire to campfire. Without them, humanity's first great conversations might never have happened. You think of how every culture on Earth, regardless of geography or era, looked up and connected the dots. The same stars, seen by every civilization, produced wildly different myths, bears, hunters, dragons, gods. But the act itself, the human impulse to link light to meaning, was universal. In this imagined world, that impulse fades. No constellations. No shared sky. No common map to trace. And you feel it, the quiet sadness of that loss. Because constellations weren't just for stories. They were for navigation. For seasons. For identity. The Polynesians carried entire star maps in their minds, navigating thousands of miles by memorized constellations, each point of light a guidepost across endless water. The Aboriginal Australians mapped their land through sky patterns, with constellations tied to sacred sites and dreamtime stories. The Inuit used the appearance and movement of stars to predict weather, to guide hunting. Without this ancient sky language, the pathways of survival would have vanished. The stories would have drifted into silence. The memory would have never begun. Historians still debate how old the earliest constellations are. Some suggest that star maps date back over 30,000 years, etched into mammoth ivory, carved into rock. Older than the wheel. Older than writing. Older than most of what we call history. And without stars, those carvings would never have existed. You take another step. And then another thought stirs gently. What about the idea of legacy? Constellations weren't just practical. They were a way of marking time, of passing knowledge through generations. The names of those patterns, Orion, Ursa Major, Scorpius, are older than empires, older than kings. They are among the few words spoken by voices long since gone that we still say today. Without stars, that lineage breaks. The very idea of remembering might change. Because memory, human memory, is built on symbols. On shared images. On signs that point beyond the self. Without a sky filled with visual anchors, would storytelling itself have evolved the same way? Would our ancestors have painted on cave walls without first imagining pictures in the night sky? You feel the question settle deep. And then you think of something stranger still. Even today, constellations continue to shape us, though we barely notice. We name our satellites after them. Our ships. Our space missions. Even our zodiac signs, echoes of ancient sky maps, continue to quietly influence millions of lives. Without those patterns, without those ancient lines of connection, something in the human psyche might have remained unformed. You pause, listening to the imagined hush. And here's a quieter thought. The sky gave us more than stories. It gave us belonging. To look up and recognize Orion, to trace the curve of the Big Dipper, is to feel a quiet bond with every person who has ever done the same. Across centuries. Across continents. Across belief systems. Without the stars, we would lose not just navigation or myth. We would lose common ground. You take another breath, slow and deep. And you walk on. The stars remain absent. But somewhere, in the soft drift of your thoughts, the echoes of that lost sky language still hum. And you carry them forward. The quiet has become familiar now. With every soft step through this imagined, endless night, you find yourself adjusting to the stillness. the absence of stars no longer startles. It simply is. And yet, deep down, another question keeps tugging at the edges of your thoughts. Would we even notice, right away? You pause, the thought settling gently. Because here's the unsettling truth: if the stars vanished, if they blinked out in some cosmic event far beyond human control, you wouldn't know. Not immediately. Not for years. Maybe not for centuries. You glance upward at the imagined sky. Still black. Still bare. But in the real world, the stars we see tonight, those faint glimmers overhead, are already ancient. The light touching your eyes has been traveling through space for years, centuries, millennia. Some of those stars? They're gone already. Dead in dust. Their light just hasn't finished arriving. Astronomers call it light delay. And it's one of the strangest, most haunting facts about the universe. What you see is never now. It's always the past. Even the closest star, the sun, takes 8 minutes for its light to reach Earth. If it were to suddenly disappear, we wouldn't know until those final 8 minutes of light ran out. The same is true for every glittering point overhead. Some stars you've wished on since childhood? They're already ghosts. You take another step. And you wonder, how long would it take, in this imagined world, for the truth to be felt? Would people continue to look up for years, seeing a sky that no longer exists? Would myths continue to be told by firelight, even as the heavens they describe have already faded? The thought is both eerie and oddly comforting. Because it means memory, beauty, outlasts reality. And then you think of something stranger still. In some ways, we already live in that kind of delay. The stars are not the only things that linger after they're gone. Words do. Images. Love. Grief. Even after a person leaves this world, their impact continues, ripples through lives, stories, laughter, tears. The sky, you realize, has always taught this lesson. That endings don't arrive when they seem to. That light keeps traveling. You breathe deeply, the quiet folding around you. Historians still debate when humanity first understood the delay of the heavens. Ancient astronomers noticed the strange motion of planets, the occasional absence of stars, comets that came and went. Some cultures believed the sky was alive, its rhythms intentional, its absences meaningful. Others suspected early on that the stars were distant, that their changes came from far away. But no one knew, not really, until the last few centuries. That what we see is always old. And in your imagined world, where every star has truly vanished, that delay becomes a kind of ghost story. A sky made of memories. A theater still running long after the actors have left. You take another soft step. And you wonder how long it would take for the realization to sink in. Would generations pass, still teaching children the names of constellations no longer real? Would poets still write of stars, unaware that the sky above had fallen silent long ago? Or would someone notice, some lone observer, peering through a telescope, catching the first glimpse of true absence? The idea unsettles you. But then, another thought rises. Even if the stars were gone, the stories would linger. And maybe that's what matters. Because memory doesn't end when the thing remembered fades. It drifts. It echoes. Just like starlight. You breathe again. And the quiet feels softer now. Less empty. Because somewhere deep in the imagined dark, you feel it. The stories would survive. The dreams would endure. The constellations would still live, if not above, then within. And so you walk on. Eyes on the dark. Heart on the light that still lingers. The air feels lighter, stranger now. The longer you drift through this imagined, starless night, the more the world around you seems to blur, not just the space you walk through, but the time. The when of things. The order of them. And then a quiet realization slides into place. Without the stars, your very sense of truth, of what's real, might begin to slip. You slow your breath, letting this thought settle. Because here's the strange, unsettling truth. The sky, even when it's full of stars, is always lying to you. Always. What you see when you look up, the constellations, the bright points, the deep glows, isn't real. Or at least, not real right now. It's a collection of ancient messages. Light that left its source so long ago that entire civilizations have risen and fallen in the time it took to reach your eyes. In some cases, the stars you see no longer exist. And yet, there they are. Steady. Silent. Seemingly eternal. It's a beautiful kind of illusion. Astronomers sometimes call this the deep time of the cosmos, the idea that when you look at the night sky, you're not seeing distance. You're seeing history. The sky is not a map of space. It's a time machine. And in your imagined world, where the stars have truly vanished, this becomes even more surreal. Because for years, maybe for lifetimes, people would still see stars that aren't there. Still navigate by ghosts. Still make wishes on echoes. You take a soft breath, letting the weight of that thought settle. And then you think of something stranger. What if this has already happened? What if somewhere, far beyond the reach of your eyes or telescopes, vast swaths of the cosmos have already fallen silent, and you're just waiting for the darkness to arrive? You feel the shiver of it. That gap between reality and perception. Historians still debate when humans first began to separate appearance from truth. Some trace it to early philosophy, Plato's cave, where shadows were mistaken for reality. Others say it began with astronomy itself, when people first realized that the stars moved, shifted, flickered in ways that defied easy explanation. But the stars, in their own quiet way, taught this lesson long before any philosopher. They taught us that what we see is not always what is. And without them, without their distant, delayed glow, would humans have learned to doubt? To question? You take another step. And then you think of how stars also taught us something gentler. That change happens slowly. That some things endure longer than fear, longer than failure, longer than memory. In a sky without stars, that sense of continuity would falter. The night would feel untethered, not just in time, but in meaning. Moments would lose their anchor. The past, the present, the future, they would blur. And you can't help but wonder. Would memory itself begin to fade differently? Because stars are memory. Every photon that touches your eye is a whisper from the past, a physical reminder that once, somewhere, something burned. Without those whispers, the world grows quieter in more ways than one. And you think of how memory shapes identity. How the stories we tell about ourselves, about our ancestors, about our place in the universe, are always, in some way, guided by what we believe to be true about the sky. In this imagined dark, those stories unspool. The constellations vanish not just from the heavens, but from the heart. You take a long, steady breath. And somewhere in the quiet, you feel the absence deepen, not just as something above you, but as something within. The stars are gone. The stories grow thin. And time itself seems to slow. But still, you walk. And still, some part of you remembers. Even when the light is gone, the memory lingers. Your footsteps are nearly silent now. The darkness above you, the endless stretch of empty sky, has become not just the setting, but the story itself. You can feel it deep in your chest, the slow, gentle unraveling of a world without stars. And yet as you walk, a quieter, softer thought begins to form. Not one of fear. Not of loss. But of something else. Because maybe, just maybe, in the absence of the stars, something new would awaken. You pause, breathing deeply. And you let yourself imagine it. Without stars, without constellations, without celestial maps to hold on to, humanity would face a choice, to fade into stillness, or to find new meaning in the dark. And you wonder, how would people change? What would rise to fill the vast quiet above? You take another soft step and feel the shape of the question settle. Throughout history, darkness has never stopped the human heart from dreaming. In fact, it has often inspired it. Artists, poets, wanderers, they have always found ways to create beauty out of absence. To tell stories even when the old stories were lost. In this imagined world, without stars, perhaps humanity would turn inward. Perhaps we would build new myths, not of sky gods, but of ocean depths. Not of constellations, but of microscopic worlds. Not of distant suns, but of the endless landscapes inside the mind. Because imagination doesn't need starlight. It needs only longing. Historians have noted that some of the greatest leaps in human thought came not during times of plenty, but during times of absence. Of difficulty. Of darkness. The invention of the written word. The rise of philosophy. The birth of music. All of them, in some way, born from spaces where something was missing. And you feel it now. The stars may be gone. But meaning, curiosity, love, these things are stubborn. They survive. You think of the future in this imagined world. Would explorers look downward instead of upward? Would we sail deeper into oceans, build telescopes that peer not into sky but into quantum worlds? Would the human heart, stripped of its familiar sky, find new ways to dream? You take another breath. The imagined air is soft, cool. And you realize, the stars were never just above us. They've always been within us. The constellations that mattered most were the ones we traced between ourselves, between minds, between hearts, between generations. You think of the first stories told by firelight. The quiet hush of hands pointing upward. The shared breath of wonder. And you see it clearly now, even if the stars vanish, the desire to connect, to wonder, to love, that will never fade. You take one more step. And though the sky remains black, silent, endless, somewhere deep inside, you carry the memory of light. The stars are gone. But you are still walking. And the story continues. And now, we slow down. The story has brought you here, to the edge of an imagined night, to a place without stars, without maps, without sound. But there's no need to rush. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let the quiet settle. Because even though the sky above in this story holds no constellations, no shimmering lights, you carry something far brighter inside you, the simple, gentle ability to imagine. To wonder. To drift. And sometimes, that's enough. The stars, after all, were never just about navigation or science or myth. They were about hope. About the small, soft comfort of looking up and knowing that something vast, something endless, something unknowable, was still there. And you? You're still here. Breathing. Resting. Wandering softly through the dark. It's okay to let go of the story now. To feel your body sinking deeper into stillness. The ground beneath you steady. The air around you light. Maybe you can even picture it, the faint ghost of starlight still brushing the edges of your mind. A memory of the sky, gentle as breath, soft as sleep. And in this moment, you don't need to reach. You don't need to search. The world is wide. The night is kind. And you are safe. So let the story fade. Let the darkness cradle you. And when you're ready, when your breath has slowed and your thoughts have softened, close your eyes. Drift. Dream. The stars will wait for you, real or not. And you are never truly alone in the dark. Good night, explorer. Sweet dreams. End of the script. Sweet dreams.